Welcome to the latest Pinnacle Forum podcast on stewarding the influence that God has given you. This is a series of conversations with leaders who happen to be Christians. Many are fellow partners and are also currently involved in one of our forums. As leaders in our fields, we gain influence. We may think that our influence came because of our intellect, our looks, our luck, our personality, and it's for our own use. The reality is that God grants this for us to use in the advancement of His kingdom. These are the stories of people who are learning how to use that God-given influence in service to others and ultimately to God. We trust these will encourage you as you steward your own God-given influence. Now on to our discussion.
I am Jim Brangenberg with I Work for Him, a ministry out of Southwest Missouri. We are a connecting ministry. We connect workplace believers to the idea that their workplace really is their mission field, that in fact, that is their place of ministry. They don't need to quit their jobs and go work in a church in order to be in full-time ministry. We also connect people to our next goal is to take those same workplace believers and connect them to ministry that will take their discipleship to a whole new level. And third of all, we connect ministries to each other so we can work on some kingdom economics, some economies of scale, and stop wasting kingdom dollars by reproducing the wheel over and over and over again. We do that mostly through podcasts, of which we've got several thousand out there on almost any platform you can find them. And they'll be a daily encouragement to you where we capture the stories of workplace believers just like you guys and just share those stories with others so people can be inspired. And I say all that because I've got a heart and passion for this conversation. And as much as many of you younger people, I'm going to call myself chronologically superior to many of you, not because I love to say that word superior, but instead of just saying I'm older, which I am, but Tom is older. So we got that. And Dad, maybe not older, but anyway, just the whole point of the conversation is we're chronologically superior, but we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. We come for the same goal, to dig deeper into our faith and connecting what it looks like to be Jesus in our workplace. And we're excited to be together. The bottom line is we want to move the pendulum. We want to move, that's not the right word. We want to move the gears together into interconnected conversations between generations. We want to deepen the questions that are asked of generations that aren't yours, so there can be a deeper understanding. Jesus said it multiple times, but more in John 17 than anywhere else. Hey, the world will know that you're mine when you walk in unity. And that includes within the generations within the body of Christ. And so that's what this conversation is be about today. And in the YSL forum this morning, we're having a conversation. This afternoon, we're having a panelist conversation. We're going to bring all of our conversation from this morning. We're going to transcribe it and we're going to use it to present that same information of everything you've shared from your hearts with the chronologically superior folks that gather later on this afternoon at 2:00 Eastern. The whole idea is just to be a catalyst for conversation. But before we get started with that, I want to just remind you, what are the different generations that are in the workplace? And right now, there are 5 or 6 generations in the workplace because there are still some of the silent generation that are in the workplace. I have a friend of mine who works for a 98-year-old guy who goes to work every day out of Kansas City. So there are lots of people still in the workplace, but I'll just remind you what these generations look like. The silent generation, born 1928 to 1945. The silent generation famously got their name for being so conformist that they were silent during the McCarthy era when the fear of communism swept the country. During this era, kids were expected to earn their way through life using a strong work ethic. Then there's the baby boom generation. The Gen Z may think the baby boomers are out-of-touch grandparents, but they had a wild youth we often don't talk about. Actually, they talk about it in movies all the time. Boomers are so named after their parents came home from World War II and the American population exploded. Baby boomers defied their parents, protested the Vietnam War, which that was probably okay to do, and created the summer of love. And that was really the beginning of the disaster on marriage in our country. Gen Xers, of which I'm one of them, so often dismissed as the slacker generation. I totally take exception to that. Generation X lived through the AIDS epidemic, MTV culture, and a shifting cultural landscape that would give rise to the LGBTQ plus rights. I would say just really to the gay lesbian stuff because the BTQ and everything else came much later. Gen X parents who were famously the first to use helicopter parenting styles, unlike their boomer parents who famously let their kids stay outside until the streetlights came on, or later, by the way. Gen X parents have a tendency to be far more involved in their children's social and educational development. And they were born from 65 to 80. millennial generation, or Gen Yers, as many of you are. Millennials lived through 9/11. Remember when Amazon only sold books? That's hilarious. And also, they're only the first generation to know a childhood with and without the internet, which now plays a significant role in their personal lives. This generation has proven to be actually incredibly community-oriented, environmentally conscious, which are traits that are being picked up by their children in the next generation. Some millennial parents who were helicoptered over in their youth are taking on a freer approach to parenting, allowing their children to explore and create without constant structure or supervision. Those of you that have parents and you're millennials, it's okay to discipline your children, though. I've met some of your children. They could use a spanking here and there. Gen Zers, they're coming to the workforce now. While still youngsters and not old enough to have made their mark as a generation, Generation Z kids are the first to be born in the world where they know nothing else besides being constantly connected to one another through phones, screens, and tablets. And Gen Alpha, they haven't gotten jobs yet, so we don't have to worry about them. It's just really important to understand, but I will tell you as a Gen Xer who is more like a millennial than a boomer for sure, even though I grew up with boomer brothers and sisters and silent generation parents, we have a deep respect. I have a deep respect for the younger generations. What is amazing from a spiritual insight, I see that so many young people really are seeking the Lord genuinely and are very much looking for genuine Christianity. They want to see it lived out for real. And that's what we're going to talk about here in the next 47 minutes. We really want for you guys to share your insights with the older generations, the chronologically superior generations that are going to be tuning in at 2:00 this afternoon so that we could share your insights, because many of you are not able to attend meetings in the middle of the day, like people who are chronologically superior. We'd like to thank our chronologically superior leader, Chuck Bryant, for joining us this morning. Good morning, Chuck.
Hi.
I'll have to explain that later. If you want to know where the term chronologically superior came from, Grant Skeldon, a millennial, wrote the book, The Passion Generation, and it was a phenomenal book from the millennials written to anybody older than them. All right. So by a show of hands, and we're going to do a little bit of this. Connor and I worked on these questions together. Who works with the majority of people their own age? There you go. One person. Okay. Boaz works with people his own age. All right. What about how many of you work with people that are chronologically superior to you? Excellent. Okay. So it just gives us an idea what we're dealing with. So here's where the open conversation is. And when you're speaking, make sure you unmute yourself. How do you perceive your view or vision of work as it is different? How do you see your work differently than the people that you work with that are chronologically superior? How do you view work differently? This is open conversation. This is not lecture time. I need some of you to actually volunteer to talk.
Many of them I find just are, I hate to say it, they're stuck in their ways. This is the way that they learn to do things. This is the way that they're comfortable doing things. And, trying anything different is scary to them. Rocking the boat is scary to them. They just want to go to work and do their job and then leave and get their paycheck. And, that's generally been my experience.
Anybody else want to add to that? Do you all agree with what Jay said?
One thing I often hear about is so many in our generation, I'm talking about my own generation, whatever, Z or millennial, is, the difference in work being rooted in purpose, work being rooted in doing something you're passionate about versus the generations above us. I'm just collecting a paycheck. This is something I've got to do. That's a major shift. I'd be curious to hear what everybody else says, if that's something they've experienced and kind of a distinction. But we, the millennial generation, it feels like there's been a massive shift in thinking about work as something that is, my purpose, part of my purpose on this earth.
Yeah, Connor, I would agree with you. I think that when I look at previous generations, like my grandpa, it was success to significance. So this idea of I'm going to work a stable job that brings in a good income to take care of my family. And once we're financially secure, then I'll think about how can my life be a life of significance or finding significance in that. I think that for our generation, it has been, I want to be significant. I want to make a difference in life. Okay, now how do I make money? While making a difference? How do I go from significance to success or be successful in my purpose?
Or successful in your significance is what you mean.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And I would tell you that one of the other observations from a guy, I'm 57. So one of the other observations from a guy, I think the millennials really are two different generations. The millennials 35 to 45 tend to have a different outlook on life than the ones 25 to 35. I would say that 35 to 45 tend to be actually more like young Generation Xers with their view on work versus people 25 to 35 in the millennial generation look at it a little bit differently. Anybody want to respond to that?
The topic too, the way I look at this is different methods to communicate between generations, because I've experienced a lot of differences, even from personal to professional. Parents love phone calls, friends and family, and other younger generations like texting. So knowing the audience and what they're comfortable with and safe with to have relationships is the key component of this generational difference in communication.
That's a great point, Nick. Really appreciate you bringing it up because it's true. But it also goes to forum. What forum are you in? In the business forum, texting in certain ways is fine. But if you're going to do a deal, it's going to be over email, or it's going to be, it's going to be email with an attachment, and you have to be used to all different kinds of conversations. I have one millennial that I do a lot of networking with who refuses to do anything except through LinkedIn. And I find that really annoying because I'd rather text or have an email. But emails are easier because you can sort them. Texts disappear after a while, and you can't hold people accountable because sooner or later your phone just blows up. All right. So what kinds of things are you, when it comes to your career or church engagement or mentorships or any or all interactions with those chronologically superior to you, what do you feel like you're gaining from them? Phil Bowen.
Wisdom and experience. I mean, just going through life, experiencing more life. As long as you're getting better, not getting bitter, you're going to have a lot to share with those who haven't gone through the same life experiences yet. But all the struggles in life, they might look different from generation to generation, but they're all really the same at the root. And there's much that we can learn from those that are ahead of us, as long as you're willing to be humble and listen. So that's what I would say.
Can you get past and gaining that wisdom and experience? Because obviously that wisdom and experience isn't technological wisdom and experience, because I find that the older generations desperately need the younger generations in order to understand technology, social media, and other ways to communicate. Do you find you're able to look past their shortfalls, Phil, to be able to celebrate what they actually know and have experienced?
Yes, but I do also personally lean critical. And I have to quiet the critical within me and just realize that that's not the end of the world. I mean, technology is just to help us become more efficient. That doesn't mean that it's going to make you more effective necessarily. And I think that there's a lot of people that I work with. I work in financial advising, and a lot of the advisors that are older, they're super effective with clients. And there's a ton of like soft skills that they have that the younger generation or my generation just hasn't quite developed in the same way.
What do you think? What do you mean by that? Soft skills? Like what?
Interpersonal, social. I'm 24, so I'm probably the youngest person here. I still grew up running outside and scraping my knee, but so much communication is through text, like has already been discussed. And I think that being able to read the physical communication, body language, I think a lot of my generation has lost a lot of that.
Lost it, or just not got it yet?
Just not gotten it yet. That'd be a better way of saying it.
All right. I love that. That's some serious wisdom coming from a 24-year-old, because that technology can be efficient, can maybe help you be efficient, but maybe not effective. Because that communication thing, face-to-face communication, even over Zoom, is way more effective than texting. Texting is very efficient, but it's not always effective because you cannot read between the lines. You can't judge facial characteristics. Like right now, I'm looking at Bailey going, please don't call me. That's the look that she had in her face. But you can't learn that stuff unless you get interacting with people. Let me just turn this question a little upside down. What do you find that your chronologically superior friends or bosses or people that you go to church with need from you and can appreciate from you?
I think one avenue of this that I think we can all share our own stories from is the wise owl role. Some of you are already here. I mean, we've tried to literally bridge the gap in the best way we know possible to have, our generation together in a forum experience, because that's part of the beauty of Pinnacle Forum. But we also see some of that beauty in those mentor-mentee relationships. And it's not always just mentor-mentee. And I'd be curious to hear from maybe even the wise owls on this. Is like, I've heard from countless wise owls, like, I have learned so much from you guys, but I know many of you folks have benefited tremendously from the wise owl role, and having that more mature mother figure, father figure in your form. It seems so natural. It has never felt to me, and obviously I'm biased. I was the one that kind of thought it up, but it's so seamless. And yes, we are different, but it's a natural sort of thing. I think only in the last, 50, 60 years has there been this intergenerational kind of dividing line that's happened.
Well, we have to recognize, okay, so my grandfathers were both dead by the time I was 7 years old. So 50 years I've had zero grandfathers. And today my parents are both 20 years older than their parents were when they died. And so one of my grandfathers never got to retire, and the other one retired and then died. That doesn't happen today as much anymore. I want to go to some of the comments. Essence, I don't see your face on here, but you said something. I find that since COVID, this is more common in a lot of age groups, and I missed you when you said that, and I want to know what was you were referring to.
Yeah, I would say some of the social interaction that comes with the increased exposure to technology and social media for those who are even averse to it during COVID were forced to interact with those platforms and things. And so I said, the reason why I made that statement is because it was more in reference to what you were talking about as far as people just coming to work and, just putting their head down, getting their work done, and the work from home aspect of it, where a lot of company culture and interactions where you would have that kind of forced interaction with your coworkers and you were forced to spend that much time with them. So someone who, like me, is kind of a bubbly personality, I'm going to try to connect with them because I'm here with you, where others, they may not necessarily do that. So my thinking is that with COVID and the time that people were, working from home, and now what do you call it? The quiet quitting and all these things that people try to portray in the news as being the prevalent thing, where really it just started to expose the lack of relationships that people had, that they were forced to have just because of interaction. Case in point, people who went to church, I went to a church for 10 years and I saw the same people every Sunday, every Wednesday, every church event. When I left that church, I can say I probably talked to maybe 2 people that go to that church. And so that exposed the nature of the relationships being that of just being a commonality of attending that particular church. I didn't go and tell everybody, hey, I'm not talking to you, or I didn't specifically not talk to anyone. I tried to reach out to people, and stuff like that, but it exposed the nature of that relationship as being just a commonality and not a true relationship. So that's what I mean by that, is that COVID really, I would say, more exposed some of those things that maybe would have just kept going on had that separation not happened.
We talk often on I Work for Him when we talk about how do you turn your workplace into a mission field. One of the things is you got to learn to build relationships with people outside of work. Why? Because work relationships are work relationships. There's no depth. They don't go anywhere. You've got to invest in them outside of work in order for them to be real relationships, because of what Mary just wrote, proximity versus intentionality. Well, you go to work together, so you're going to talk to each other, but you don't really know anything about each other. Same thing happens at church. And I agree, Essence, that's powerful. Well, what really happened during COVID is the church got culled a little bit. A lot of people that were just, I'd like to call them, this may be offensive to some, but mamby-pamby weenie butt Christians who really weren't so sure they wanted to follow Jesus. They just said, well, this is kind of inconvenient. I don't want to watch on Facebook, so I'll just stop going to church. But yet it took some of us way deeper in our faith because we realized, wow, this is just a precursor of what's to come. All right, back on topic, but thank you, Essence, so much. I want to hear from Tom O'Karma. When you look at this younger generation as one of the wise owls, and Deb, I'm coming to you next, and then Sabrina, I'm coming to you after that. When you look at these people who are chronologically inferior to you, what do you, as a wise owl, what are you gaining from the conversations you have with them on a weekly basis?
Well, I have a much better perspective on the life that they're living and the life that's thrown at them. Well, when I was younger, life was a lot simpler. I mean, there were 4 or 5 channels on television, and that was about it. And so the younger folks are pounded from all different angles, from people with a lot of different worldviews, where, being from the south side of Chicago, our perspective was big Catholic church, big Catholic community. Values were similar, and that was about it. So it helps me understand where they're coming from. They're not necessarily anti things that I believe in. They just don't see them the same way I do because of what they've been exposed to. And that's been really interesting for me.
I appreciate you saying that. And I'm going to comment on Benjamin Riley.
Yeah, Benjamin's point was really
Benjamin, very good. And we're going to bring that down. I'm going to go to you, Deb. Just so you understand some perspective, Ben, I grew up in a household where my father never shared his feelings until he was almost 90. He grew up in a household where his father never shared his feelings, never told him he loved him. So look at Gen Xers, who many of you have bosses who are Gen Xers or boomers. We grew up with fathers who never expressed emotion because we were told that was unmanly. We were told never to cry. Growing up, we were told that to show emotion other than anger was unacceptable. Anger and happiness, of course, but to express, like to say, what, that really hurt my feelings. Nobody said that. Imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger or the Hulk saying, that hurt my feelings. No, people didn't say that. But it is something we're learning to do. We're learning that it's acceptable. And as you follow Jesus, you understand. And as you get older, you realize that showing emotions is a Holy Spirit trait as men. And so if you've got men in your life or even women in your life, but this is not typically a woman issue, encourage them, just ask them a question. How does that make you feel? How are you feeling about that? Because they're not used to expressing it in those terms. That's something my wife and I had to work on. We've been married 37 years. We've known each other 41 years. We met in high school. And I had to learn to tell her how I was feeling because I had never seen it demonstrated before. So I'm just asking for a little more grace, Ben, but also to challenge those people in your life to say, well, how does that make you feel? It's just something we're learning. So certainly Jesus followers are learning, but other guys who aren't Jesus followers, they're learning that it's okay to express that because there's power in expressing your emotions. Deb, I want to go to you. Deb and I have known each other for a lot of years already. Deb, you've been working and pouring your life into so many people over the years. In working with the YSLers and being a wise owl in their lives, what is it that you gleaned the most from them?
Well, I'll start by saying I've always been age agnostic. I grew up in a household with parents who believed that they needed friends in every decade of life. So that was modeled for me. So it's very natural to me to connect with anybody of any age. I don't even look at age. I'm looking at the person for who they are, where they are, what God has wired into them that I can benefit from. And what do I have that I can share with others that they don't have that they can benefit from? So I get more than I give, it feels like, in the meetings that I attend with Mary and our group. It has nothing to do with age for me.
I love that. That's good. And I would tell you, I had Martha's parents, my wife's parents, demonstrated that exact same thing, Deb. They hung out with people of all different generations. And Martha and I have had an opportunity to mentor a lot of people that are younger than us and mentor a lot of people that are older than us in marriage and love that interaction. So it's powerful. I want to go to you, Sabrina, because you're kind of stuck in the middle of all of us. So you're not a millennial. Well, you are.
Not quite.
Like you're just outside a millennial world. So you're a young Xer. You're on the other end of the generation from me. What do you glean from your younger brothers and sisters how is it impacting your life in a positive way? And how do you think you could make it better?
Well, for me, it's that willingness to be transparent. This whole Brene Brown vulnerability thing, that has been life-changing for me. So I love that the younger generation has really picked up on that and run with it, because I was, raised by boomers that, children are to be seen and not heard, sit in the corner and, like you said, dad with this is what I'm going to do. This is what's happening. And don't say anything opposed to, what I'm saying. So, just hearing, just the willingness to just be open. And to Ben's point, always having to put your best foot forward. I mean, perfectionism, gripped Gen Xers. We could not make any mistakes. We had to be perfect in everything. So I love learning that.
I must have missed that memo. Because that one I didn't get. I made all the mistakes.
Oh no, we made them, but we couldn't show that we actually made them.
Yeah. One thing I'm reminded of that I think the younger generations are starting to get, that I think even the wise owls that have shared have seen it modeled in us, is, when we're called in relationship with Christ, Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." Just countless scriptures I could go through of describing how our relationship with Christ should be, right? How it should be vulnerable, how it should be transparent, how it should we don't clean ourselves up to come to Christ. And you read Psalms and the aching and the pain and the crying out. And I think that our generation is more and more, when we're entering a relationship with others, if Christ is the perfect example, if our relationship with Christ is the perfect example of what a relationship should look like, done at its best, why shouldn't our relationships with one another look like that? And so when I think of an older generation, I do think of there is a stark divide of, you guys are too emotional, you got to rub some dirt on it, versus then the younger generation is, you guys don't want to talk about anything real, right? So it's this odd dichotomy. And I think we both could come together and give a little ground on that. I do think, our generation may be a little soft in some aspects, but I think when we're called in a relationship, whether that be work, whether that be church, whether that be a wise owl, YSLE in a forum, we're called into authenticity, vulnerability, transparency, and reciprocation of that.
I really appreciate it. And I love the comment. And I think, Mary, you're the one that there's no junior Holy Spirit. I remember when I gave my life to Christ at 13, I was filled with the Holy Spirit, and I saw myself do things I could not explain. And often I find generations of my age or older discounting the wisdom that comes through the Holy Spirit through people that are chronologically inferior to me or younger than me. And I think that is a travesty, because Paul constantly talked about how phenomenal Timothy was as Timothy poured out his faith into others. But that's a teaching thing. That's a discipleship thing. It's also a mentoring thing, which is why I want to go to Santosh. I don't know if I said your name right, Santosh, so I apologize if it's what it says on there. You mentioned that you'd like to be connected with the mentor. Talk to me about why you feel like mentoring is something you want to be involved in.
I think, at church, there's great teaching on spiritual things and, all that. But when it comes to the workplace, there's a gap. We don't really talk about leadership or workplace politics or anything like that. So okay. I think there's room for, I guess, growth by connecting with someone specifically.
So here's my challenge to you and to all of you, is that maybe you really need a one-on-one mentor. And when I say mentor, I mean somebody who loves Jesus, who's going to give you discipleship along with life. That mentoring to me is you're going to get all of that person into you, but you're also going to give all of your person into them. Santosh, is there anybody in your life who loves Jesus, who is further down the path and following Jesus than you are, that you could reach out to and say, listen, I need a mentor in my life. Would you allow me to walk alongside you in life? And would you mentor me? Can I learn from you? And can we walk together in life? Is there somebody like that you could ask that question of?
I have a relationship with older men who are Christian at church and both outside of church as well. But what I don't have as much access to is older men who are in business that are also Christian, that have maybe run companies of a particular size. There's always small business owners and stuff, but.
So I would start praying about that specifically, and I would ask Connor to connect you direct up to Chuck Bryan, because he probably knows somebody in your area of the country that may be able to fill that role. And Chuck is the one of secondary to me, maybe, but he's one of the greatest connectors in the country. Sorry, Chuck, just being funny. I know it's early for you Arizona people, But Santosh, don't give up on that. That is a desire that God has placed on your heart to be mentored and discipled, and recognize that and pursue it, because God has something deep in there for you, but you're going to have to make some steps. You're going to have to put your feet into the water to start spreading the waters, but you have to do that. But reach out to Connor, and if Connor connect with Chuck, and Chuck's got somebody. Chuck knows people in every city across the country, and probably knows somebody, just the person that you can get your life invested with.
I think just circling back and connecting with what you guys are saying here, what the older generation could use from us, I think, is just what you're talking about, our initiative to seek them out. For the most part, discipleship has not been modeled in the American church over the last 50 years, and finding people who are equipped to do that may be difficult, but finding somebody, Santosh, who you do see their character, they're at church, they're probably in business. Just, if it's not going to be even a long-term thing, just go seek out a cup of coffee with them. And if you have particular problems, just ask them about it. I think that is honoring. That is something that the older generation needs from us. We can get a little quick with the pace of the world. So patience probably too is another one of those things. But I think it all stems from, and even older to younger, is not seeing, I think sometimes they see the younger generation as slacking maybe to some extent. And so they write them off as not as hardworking. So it just takes honor again. I think it was Deb's point of saying these people have value no matter their age. In humility, we can learn from children, right? We
absolutely
get to a point where we do think we know it all, and then you miss out on what God has for us, because he's never ending. And the things that we learn about each other, we're never going to know everything about another person. So
I love your point about it's honoring to ask. And I would agree. If somebody came up to me and asked that question, Jim, would you invest your life in me? Can I walk alongside life with you? I would be honored. And I've done it dozens of times. I want to go to Deb for a second. She wants to talk about how's the best way to ask. And then Joy, I'll go to you for a second, but I also, Joy Delito, but I also wanted to ask Carol Clayton because she's got some, we'll just go to Joy after Deb. Deb, talk about what's the best way to ask? What do you think?
Be specific. Think through what it is that you're looking for, because a general broad ask of someone who's already mentoring others, working, taking care of family, you got the picture. Their plate is already full, and they are the most likely to take someone else onto that plate. But when you can come to someone and say, I see this in you, I'd like to learn more. Will you walk with me on this subject or this circumstance? That makes it much more clear as to time that might be involved, expectations that you might have, so that it makes it easier to be clear about yes or no from the mentor's perspective. Thanks.
Great word. I totally agree. And that relationship can grow. I will also challenge all of you, because I don't know any of you very well. Don't discount your grandparents. Many of you have been separated from your grandparents because of divorce in families or because of just separation across the country. But your grandparents have unique wisdom that you can grab, that you can't grab from anybody else on the planet. They know your family history. And they also will have wisdom that often young people don't get access to. Don't discount that. I would have desperately loved to have gotten to know my grandparents. I didn't know them. I got to know Martha's grandparents, and I gleaned so much from them, even in the 10 years that we had them before they both died. So I want to go to Joy. Joy, you wanted to share a little bit about how you were mentored specifically by a Pinnacle partner. Go ahead, Joy. Share a little bit of your story, please.
Yeah, I would say in seeking a mentor, it's okay if they say no the first time. My mentor said no the very first time I asked, but I think that it's really important to be in the position where you have to create value for them back. I think in our generation, millennials were so quick to have access to everything that we do get into a taking mentality. And so we think, oh, how can I get all this information? Or, oh, I need this little part of my story. I'm going to ask that person to mentor me in that. But if you're not bringing any sort of value back into that relationship, I think that that's where a lot of times we miss things, is because previous generations they've been in the trenches. They have a network worth of people that they not only could call on, but have the personal relationships with and the clout with. And I think that that's something that my age group is missing. Yes, we have access to everything. Yes, we can get the answers faster a lot of times, but at the same time, we weren't in the trenches with those people. And so we don't always have the relationship and the intricate knowledge that the older generations have. So I think that's important to look for in a mentorship. And I think that everybody should seek one, but I think that you have to be able to sometimes present that in a way of how and what you are going to bring back to that relationship.
I love that. And that perspective is so important for us all to have. And because when you get involved in any kind of relationship with somebody that's not like you, you're going to glean a lot from them, not just what you're seeking, but you can also, but to pursue somebody, to let them know, hey, you're kind of busy right now, but can I come back at this conversation? If you find somebody that you want to emulate something in their life, don't give that up. You can learn from them. It's so valuable. And believe me, this is never done. This is something I heard in a sermon years ago. Everybody needs a Paul in their life, a Barnabas in their life, and a Timothy in their life. Everybody should be having a mentor, somebody who's an encourager, and somebody they're pouring their heart into. So let me ask this question. By a raise of hands, how many of you are mentoring somebody else? Okay, a little more than half of you. That's fantastic, because those kind of relationships teach you how to be a good mentee, not just a mentor, because you learn how to listen. All right, I want to finish. We're running out of time. We got 14 minutes left, and I want to make sure we open up to some questions here in about 4 minutes. When you feel misunderstood by the generations around you, how do you lead yourself, and how do you humble yourself to help teach them when you're being misunderstood? Maybe give an example of a situation and talk to us how you work that out. Bailey, you got anything like that? You seem like you want to share something today.
I'm trying to think of an example of what that looks like, because I do work a lot with some older folks.
We're trying to change you guys chronologically superior people. None of us like to be called older people. Seriously. Okay, go ahead. All right. So, but have you ever been misunderstood, Bailey?
Yes.
And what do you do? Because it's frustrating to be misunderstood, especially if somebody takes offense at something you said. What do you do to try to fix that?
I think it's mostly just going directly to the person and having a discussion with them, and just being really honest about where that misunderstanding happened and how we can move forward together.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? Anybody else been misunderstood by somebody chronologically superior to you?
For me, Jim, it's a lot to do with my emotions. I don't necessarily have them in my body language always, but doesn't mean I necessarily don't feel things. So I've had to articulate even with my spouse that, hey, I'm angry right now. I may not show it, and I may not physically or verbally, but I would be. So I've had to be self-aware of those things about myself.
Here's one of the things, I don't know how many of you are married yet, but one of the greatest things you could ever do for your spouse is when you're feeling something, share that feeling, because you know what? They can't read your mind. And of course, if your spouse who spends all day long with you and you're married to, they're your best friend, if they can't read your mind, neither can the people that you work with, neither can the people that you go to church with, are the people in your forum or in your small group at church. So if you're having a feeling, share it, like, wow, I am really feeling hurt right now because of that comment, or just be able to communicate it. That really makes me angry.
I learned something that you can't slap the same formula on every situation. You really have to take people for who they are, take the situation for what it is. Like you said, people can't read your minds. You have to be able to have deep conversations. I have a son that's a millennial and I have a daughter that's a Gen Z. They're totally different people. And, I used to think that, yeah, I got this parenting thing down, with my millennial son that's really laid back. And I tried the same tactics on my Gen Z daughter, and it just blew up in my face. So you really have to be able to take each person, each situation, and really rely on the power of the Holy Spirit to be able to communicate to people in effective ways. So you can't choose the same formula just because it worked for this person who was a boomer. It doesn't mean it's going to work on the next person the same way.
I would say that, some of the situations that come up, especially kind of in the consulting world that I'm in, is when you see a problem arise, it's always good to be the one to initiate and to be the one to address it and communicate. I mean, more communication is almost always better than letting things kind of just play out and spiral downwards. I think that, where there is a misunderstanding or miscommunication, I usually try to call, at least if I can't, talk to them face to face, in person very easily. But usually it's kind of like, hey, we need to get together to discuss this, like something, we got our wires crossed. So I think that's just a general best practice. And I've had to do that, managing people younger than me too, in realizing, okay, we need to have a face-to-face conversation on this because my expectation and what you're doing is not matching.
So let me just fill up I'm going to fill in the blanks. What you're saying is that you can't solve conflict over a text, is what you're saying.
Not usually, no.
No.
Not if it's complicated.
Well, no, isn't most conflict complicated? Because we've got two people that have differing emotions. And that's one of the things I find with my own kids who are your guys' age, is that you can't, solving conflict is difficult no matter how you do this. And as long as you're dealing with people, there's going to be conflict. And if you're going to be dealing with conflict, and as a Jesus follower, we don't have a choice but to work through conflict because we're called to forgive everybody. If we've been abused, doesn't mean we need to reconcile our relationship with them, but we still need to forgive them, whatever it is. And so we need to recognize you can't do that over a text, and over a phone conversation. It's okay, but Zoom is way more effective because then you can see facial expressions. Because if somebody's making a face, but they're on the phone, sometimes you can hear it. You can usually hear a smile when you're on the phone, but you can't usually see a frown or furious emotions unless you can hear it in their voice. So it's very important. Carol, I want to call on you because you're one of those wise owls on this call that you haven't shared a single thing yet. You've been hiding in the bottom corner of the screen. Talk to us about your experience, and then we're going to open this up to conversation. Why do you invest your life into those that are younger than you?
I do it because I am actually gaining more from my role as a wise owl than I believe I'm giving, just as Deb said, that they give me a new perspective, new language, but yet at the same time, what I see is a thread that winds through where many of the women are facing situations that I, as a woman, faced in the workplace. And that has not changed. That's been very interesting. We had a conversation last week, and I was just sitting there kind of smirking through most of the conversation because it was so similar to what I had experienced. But as Tom had said, we grew up in a time, I'm 67, I'm a boomer. We grew up in a time where life was so much simpler. And so gaining an understanding of what is actually going on and what these younger generations have come through, I think is so important to those of us who are more wise.
I saw a quote that really moved me. I can't find the person who said it. They're out of Los Angeles, but they said, "Be the person you needed when you were younger," and that's really motivated me to stay involved with the YSL group, even though I've got a couple other groups and what have you, because I didn't have that. And to the extent I can pass that along beside our daughters, that makes me feel good, like I'm contributing.
I had the immense privilege. God rescued me. My father was not a believer when I became a believer, and God sent me a college student who invested his life in me. And I am forever grateful. So that's why I'm saying be that person to those people younger than you. All right, we've got 5 minutes left. I'd like to open it up to questions. or things you'd like to say, I'd love it if you would say, so that I could take this to the later group, something that you have gained from hanging around older people, chronologically superior people. So anything, just one word, things you've gained from them, that you gained from hanging out with them, or a question that you'd like to ask before we go, or a statement you'd like to make. Peter, Kim, go ahead, tell us something from your heart.
Yeah. Speaking of those who are older and wiser than me, I think over time, like some of the things that I did not understand, it starts to be connected by the Lord, I think, as I go through on the journey. And so when I look at that as like now in the present time, if there's something who's older, wiser than me, and I don't quite see eye to eye or understand it, just keeping that in mind is like they may know or see something that I haven't yet come across or gone through. And so trusting in the Lord, especially again, if they're a believer in Christ and have the Holy Spirit, probably wise for me to just, wait and be patient and just see what God is trying to teach me through the mature Christian and younger. Since that topic has come up, I think it's come up in maybe different ways, but one of the things through prayers, because it's something that's coming up for me after these calls, three of the younger generation, and just thinking about what I was like when I was their age, right? 23 years old, 26, and the things that I didn't know. And I think it was Tom who put it well, like just, kind of being able to put myself back and at that time and age of my life and try to be a mentor or a good guiding influence that perhaps I could have benefited from when I was their age. And so, yeah, those are some of my thoughts. I know we're running out of time, so
appreciate it. Thank you for saying that. One of the greatest things I ever learned from my wife is that hurting people hurt other people. And if you were trying to understand that most people are ogres. Onions have layers, ogres have layers. So did Shrek, and all of us are just like that. And we use those layers to cover up that hurt. And that's usually comes out in conflict. All right, we have a couple of people we haven't heard from at all. Keith, I don't think we've heard anything from you or Patrick. So Keith, go first. Share something that you've got a thought for us or a question or something.
Yeah, so I guess, Jim, I've just been thinking about Santosh's comment with mentoring. And, personally, I haven't had that modeled for me. So that was one of the big reasons I joined the forum, just looking for people local in my church, but trying to connect one-on-one is difficult because you've got different areas of life. You got marriage, parenting, you got work, you got church, and a lot of times none of these intersect, right? And so the forum has been great to kind of bridge all of those together. But there is a one-on-one component face-to-face that I think there would be an advantage. It's just been hard. I think Deb may have said it, just because those people tend to be overloaded, right? And so to be specific, I think it's important to be able to ask good questions, and not having it modeled for you, it's difficult to know what those good questions are to try to be specific, right? So I think to his question, is there some type of guide of what it looks like to be a mentor, what kind of questions, because I think being a mentor, you have to ask the mentee good questions, right? I need stuff pulled out of me. My brain doesn't think in those ways unless somebody's asking me the right questions. I'm totally transparent. I'll answer any question asked, but pulling that stuff out is a critical piece.
I would say something that I think Sabrina said it, or somebody else might have said it, but ask the Holy Spirit, who is it you want me to invest my life into and for them to invest their life in me? And really pray into that and let God open your eyes, because it may be that quiet person in the room that wants to share with you. And I want to give Patrick a chance just to share anything from his heart, because he's the last one who hasn't said anything. Patrick, you got anything you want to share before we go today?
From my private experience, I've had quite a few different mentors. Just a tip and a best practice for me is I always set the end goal. So, I'd love to have you as a mentor for the next 6 months where we meet once a week, right? Just kind of give that investment of what you're going to commit to as a mentee. But no, I mean, I work a lot around the military, and I'll tell you some of the stories that I have had the privilege of hearing, one-on-one from World War II veterans, who served in the trenches. That's just experience and knowledge that you cannot get secondhand, really. So you've got to talk to them to try and understand and pull that out from them. So I think that's kind of the approach that I've taken, is the mentee really has to be the one driving. The mentee has to be the one that's in the driving seat. And then the other piece I'd say is not just a mentee, but also, kind of spiritual father, that spiritual mother.
I got to cut you off because we're out of time, but I want to say You just said something super powerful, Patrick. You need to initiate it. And let me just tell you why this is great. And Mary, I'm going to have you close this in prayer. You know why you need to initiate it? As Patrick just said, because most of the people chronologically superior to you don't feel valuable and they don't think they have anything to offer. And so therefore they have a low view of themselves. They don't see themselves the way you see them. And by you initiating, you're seeing value in them that they don't see in themselves. And that is a lot of times why you need to initiate. It's been a phenomenal conversation. I'm sorry to have to cut you off, Patrick. I apologize. Mary, we need you to close us out in prayer. It's 9:01. I apologize for going a minute over, but thank you guys for a great conversation. We're going to take this stuff with us to the older generations. And the next time we're going to facilitate a conversation where hopefully we can grab everybody together. Mary, close us out.
Yeah. You guys know I always say we're in overtime now. So if you have to go to get on with your day, blessings as you go. I'm going to open, and if you feel led to pray about something we talked about today, I want to give space for that too. So God, thank you so much for this opportunity to gather together, to learn from one another and to share what it is that you're doing in our lives through the relationships that we have with other generations. God, I pray that you would speak to each one of us as to what our next step is in bridging this gap and advancing the kingdom through these relationships. Lord, give us wisdom and give us humility to see everyone through your eyes and see that each person has something to give and we can receive from everyone.
Father, that we would surround ourselves with people just like these people on this call today. People who desperately want to know you better and want to understand life better through a perspective of your son, Jesus. Give us the wisdom. Surround us with people that we need to be surrounded with so that we can walk closely with you in everything that we do, no matter what our work is.